It doesn't matter what they want to call it. The matter of fact is that you're going to end up paying a lot more of your labor later on for the same things that you can get today. Hello YouTubers, Alaska Prepper here. Ladies and gentlemen, Martin Armstrong has written a new book and it's called Manipulating the World Economy. And this is very important because I believe that this is what is going to crush us all. And it doesn't matter how well prepared you are, you will feel this. Because not only will our country in particular feel this when the balloon finally pops, but the entire world will as well. And I believe that understanding this to the best of your ability will help you to better prepare. So hold on, because I've got a lot of things to show you. And by the end of this, I think that if you're not already convinced, you will be convinced that you need to start preparing for a world where hyperinflation is a true possibility. And whether or not we remain on a dollar system, we will see the purchasing power of our labor units diminish. Because inflation only does one thing, and that is it steals your labor, your time, your freedom. The economic theories that dominated the field during the 20th century have failed us and empowered government to believe that they can manipulate the business cycle. And like I said, ladies and gentlemen, the business cycle, if you take a look at a chart of the Dow Jones, of the NASDAQ or anything, all those squiggly little lines that you see, that represents human behavior. And whenever governments or anything thinks that they can manipulate nature, in the end, nature always wins. Every economic theory presented post-Marxism has assumed that the complexity of the business cycle can be reduced to a single cause and effect. To date, no attempt to manipulate the cycle has prevented a recession or financial crisis. We now face a truly monumental crisis. Central banks around the world are trapped. Their attempt to stimulate the economy through quantitative easing, and for those of you that don't know what quantitative easing is, it's just the central bank either lowering interest rates or buying assets. That's what quantitative easing is. Whenever the central bank buys assets, they print money out of thin air, and they buy assets, be it mortgage-backed securities from banks or be it treasury bonds from the government. And or they lower interest rates, which makes it a lot easier for people to borrow money from the bank. Whenever you borrow money from a bank, for whatever reason, even as simple as using your credit card, money is being created out of thin air, ladies and gentlemen, and that is inflationary. Their attempt to stimulate the economy through quantitative easing and rate manipulation has disastrously failed. The central banks have primarily purchased government debt, effectively keeping governments on life support by allowing them to issue new debt at substantially lower rates. In addition to this catastrophic QE policy, political fiscal spending on various programs and agencies has burdened governments with a debt that they can never repay. And that is a fact, ladies and gentlemen. All governmental debt, all national debt, public debt, however you want to call it, that exists on a foundation of a fiat currency, or a currency that is really not backed by anything except for your labor, can never ever be paid back, ever. That is the way that the system was created, in order for your labor to be stolen from you. So realize that any kind of public debt, like our national debt here in the US, that can never be paid back. It's impossible that it will ever be paid back. Impossible, mathematically speaking. The future crisis is one created by government. This time we are not likely to fix the problem without major political reform, which all governments will resist. These policies have led many to assume that government can freely create money without inflation. After creating trillions of dollars to buy government debt with no appreciable inflation, many conclude that everything has changed. And that is very far from the truth, ladies and gentlemen. Eventually, inflation will come to bite us in the hind end. And they are calling this MMT, ladies and gentlemen, modern monetary theory. And he says that if they are correct, then why bother to have taxes? Ask yourselves that question. If the government can just print out of thin air and create wealth, then why do they have to collect taxes? Why don't they just print the money and not allow us to collect taxes? It goes back to what I told you before, that the only thing that backs up a fiat currency is the ability of the population to be able to work and for the government to steal their labor. That's the only thing that backs up a fiat currency. The money that you earn in the future, it is guaranteed that that money will buy you less. Guaranteed. Because that money that they create derives its value from the dollars that you've already earned with your labor. So whenever they print money out of thin air, it steals value from your labor, from the dollars that you've already earned. And it steals value from the dollars that you're earning currently. That's why the minimum wage will never work. The minimum wage will never work because why? It's inflationary. If you make a business pay $20 an hour, they're going to have to raise what they charge if they want to stay in business. And what's that going to do? It's going to make that $20 an hour that you're getting now eventually worth less, meaning that you'll be able to buy less with it. So governments cannot print themselves into prosperity. The only thing that will allow prosperity, ladies and gentlemen, is labor, is your labor without all of the restrictions that are put on it, like being taxed, like all of the regulations that they put. I read somewhere that a large corporation usually spends a lot of money and manpower just on trying to keep up with the regulations that governments put forth. And that right there is a hidden tax that many people don't consider a tax. But all of those regulations that businesses have to adhere by, set forth by government, they have to take those expenses and pass it on to the consumer, which is you and I. Now let me show you something here about hyperinflation. Now for those of you that don't think this can come to the US or that this can come to your country, ask yourselves a question. Does your government fall within the parameters that I just described from what I just read to you? Are they printing money out of thin air? What is their money backed up by? Is it backed up by a physical asset or is it backed up by your labor? I hope you understand that now, that fiat currencies only have one backing, and that is your labor. Think about it this way, ladies and gentlemen. If every country out there in the world, besides the US, thought that the US could not pay back the interest on its debt, what do you think would happen to the value of the dollar? Do you think that they would continue to use it? That is the only thing that is backing up the dollar, is that we can work and pay taxes to pay that interest on the debt. Now, what is it really that we're paying? When we pay that interest on the debt, how is that money being generated? Through our labor, through our tax dollars. So if other countries out there that have the dollar at a high standing, that they see the dollar as a good thing, if they saw that we could no longer pay the interest on that debt because there wasn't enough taxes being generated to pay the interest on that debt, do you think that the dollar would be held at a high standing or lower standing? I'll let you answer that question for yourself. Now this chart is a chart that went through 2017, and it's the 28 countries, I believe, that have had the highest inflation in the last century or so. But let's take a look at the ones that are close to us. Let's say within the last 20 years or so. We see that Zimbabwe here in 2008 had, I don't know, this looks like 7 quadrillion% inflation, something like that. I mean, here Yugoslavia back 25 years ago or so had, what is this, 3 trillion? I'm not reading all the zeros, but you can see all the zeros here. Germany in 1923, of course, we all know about that, but let's stick to the current. Venezuela, we all know, here in 2016, during the early days of their hyperinflation, ladies and gentlemen, they were at 219%. And now I believe that they're like at 7,000% this year, something like that. But just to show you that it can happen. It can happen anywhere. And I believe that it will happen here in the United States last. Why? Because surprisingly, and some people may not be able to grasp this concept, surprisingly, there is a dollar shortage around the world. because a lot of countries actually put value on the dollar. And when they start to hyperinflate their own currencies, their citizens run to the dollar. And there is so much debt out there. There is so much dollar-denominated debt in the world that in order for that debt to be paid back in dollars, dollars have to be generated. So there's actually a dollar shortage right now in the world. But ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you this. What is going to happen, and it will eventually happen because history says so. What is going to happen when the dollar is no longer revered as the #1 currency in the world anymore, and countries get away from it and stop using it? Where is the only place in the world that has to legally accept the dollar for their services and their products? It's here, the US. We have to accept those dollars for our services and or the products that we manufacture and export. Well, what happens when all of those dollars come back because other countries don't want to use them? Let me show you what happens. Hyperinflation hits Turkey. And of course, what happens when hyperinflation occurs? The price of foods, the price of commodities like gasoline, oil, food, water, everything, electricity, everything goes up and people get angry. That's what happens, ladies and gentlemen, when hyperinflation ensues. That's what happens when a country's citizenry no longer trusts their own currency. What's happening in Turkey right now is what happens when people stop trusting their government. Lebanon's inflation rate is worse than Zimbabwe and Venezuela's. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what happens when a country's citizenry stops trusting the currency that their government prints out of thin air. They catch on. They catch on that what they are printing is just a piece of paper that has absolutely no value. And they do that in order to stay in power. That is the only way that government can exist, is through our labor. So what am I saying? I'm saying is that get prepared, because this is coming for all of us. We have been very blessed in this country, the United States of America. We have been very blessed to have as much time as we've been given in order to prepare. But this is coming for all of us. Nature cares not who you are, where you live, what your race is, ethnicity, who you call your God, or who you marry. Nature cares not. It is coming for us, and you need to prepare for the inevitable. All right, ladies and gentlemen. And some people may say, well, what if we just do go to a different system? Well, ladies and gentlemen, we went to a different system back in 1971 when Richard Nixon took us off of the Bretton Woods / gold standard. Yes, we went to a different system when we still had a U.S. Federal Reserve note. We still had a dollar. Some people may argue, well, that was the same system. No, because what he did is he changed the definition of what a dollar is. So we may wake up tomorrow with the same dollar, the same looking dollar that we have today, but the definition of what that dollar is will no longer be what it was. For example, back when the dollar was backed by gold and silver, the definition of a dollar was 371.25 grains of fine silver. That was the definition of a dollar, and I believe it still is, per the Constitution of these United States. 371.25 grains of fine silver is the definition of $1. Well, what did they do? They changed that when they entered into the Bretton Woods Agreement. And then they changed that agreement once Nixon took us off the gold standard or of Bretton Woods. Well, the next time that they changed the definition of what a dollar is, ladies and gentlemen, you may still have the dollars, but will those dollars buy you the same that they used to buy you before they changed that definition? See, ladies and gentlemen, whenever there's a reset, it is the people that suffer. Inflation doesn't really hurt the millionaires, the billionaires. Do you think that a millionaire or a billionaire could care less if a pound of steak went up by twice? If a millionaire goes shopping or has someone go shopping for him or her, and they find out that a pound of ribeye went from $9 to $18, do you think they're going to stop eating ribeye? Absolutely not. And I'm using ribeye because that's like what I always use, because I love ribeye. But does it affect someone who's in the middle class? Does it affect someone who's poor when the pound of ground beef goes from 99 cents to $4.59 a pound in a 10-year span, you better believe that it affects them. Why? Because it's not only that that's going up, it's everything else. Now, this next year, it's been predicted that next year in the United States, the average family is going to have to spend about an additional $4,000 to get the same stuff that they got this year. Now, this year has been bad enough. But now, next year, they're predicting that it's going to take an additional $4,000 or so for the average family to get the same stuff that they got this year. Do you think it's going to get any better? And I wanted to show you this to finish off. It says here, hyperinflation, is it likely in 2021 or 2022? I think not. Why do I think not? Because we are the world reserve currency. The Federal Reserve note is the world reserve currency. And I believe that it'll be the last one to fall. It is the cleanest shirt in a dirty hamper. All right? It is the sharpest knife in the tool shed. Right? That's what people like to say about the dollar. That it still has a place in the world economy, but it's still garbage. All right? And this is coming from billionaires. I believe it's Ray Dalio that's famously said that the dollar is trash, that cash is trash, to get rid of it and get real assets. And that's what millionaires and billionaires are doing right now, ladies and gentlemen. Millionaires and billionaires for the last year and a half, 2 years, and I've reported on this before, have been dumping their stocks, have been dumping their paper assets and getting into real stuff. I mean, you can think of a billionaire right now that's bought over 250,000 acres of farmland in the U.S. Millionaires are buying land all over the world, where some countries are making laws saying, hey, you can't buy any more land because you've bought so much. They are buying real things with their money. And they're also keeping cash on the side so that when the balloon pops, there will be a short period of deflation where their cash will actually be able to get them more. Because like I said before, we have a problem in the world where there are not enough dollars. And when the balloon pops, there's going to be even less dollars in the system and more dollars needed, which is going to make those dollars worth more for a short period of time until the Federal Reserve or the central banks around the world start printing like there's no tomorrow. And if we think that they're printing a lot now, you just wait, ladies and gentlemen. It is going to be a show that you will never forget. You'll be telling your grandkids about this one day. Now, this person here says that there are two causes of inflation. There are two major causes that lead to inflation, which are demand pull inflation and cost push inflation. Demand pull inflation is the most common cause, where the demand of goods and services overcomes the supply. Pretty much supply and demand is what this person is saying. That is the most common inflationary force. I would say that the most common inflationary force is the printing of money, because the government doesn't stop printing money. Let me go ahead and finish it off with this, ladies and gentlemen. I know this took a little longer than I hoped, but I think that the information here is very important. I will go ahead and leave the link to this article right here and to the Martin Armstrong article under the description of the video all the way at the very bottom, because there's a lot to read here. All right. Here he finishes out by saying hyperinflation leads to an escalation in the prices of even basic goods, such as food, fuel, etc., as a result of these goods becoming scarce. Not necessarily as a result of the goods becoming scarce, ladies and gentlemen. The reason the goods become scarce is because there is a lot of inflation, meaning a lot more money in the system. And people realize that the money is worth less, so then they go out there and they panic buy all at once, trying to get rid of their paper money that they know is worthless every day into real goods. Even though hyperinflation can be seen rarely, once it happens, it can go way out of control very quickly. And that is true. All we have to do is take a look at history for that. Causes of hyperinflation. And this is one of the things I want you to really get out of this video. The two major causes of hyperinflation are demand pull inflation, meaning that people want to get stuff in a hurry, which I don't really agree with that 100% because of what I just explained to you. Because he doesn't explain why it is that people want to get physical stuff. Why is it that they want to get physical stuff? And it's because they realize that their dollars are becoming worth less. But anyways, he goes on to say, and an increase in the money supply. Hallelujah. He finally said an increase in the money supply. All right. Usually the government prints out more money as a measure for taking care of its expenditures. Due to this, the supply of money increases and results in inflation. And because of all of this money printing being put out, being printed out of thin air, there would be too much money laying around. Prices of goods and services experience rapid growth. Before anyone could know what is happening, they would expect continuous inflation. When such a situation occurs, people panic and buy more goods and services in advance to avoid paying more prices for them later. This leads to a demand for goods and results in inflation. Stockpiling goods and leading to a shortage in the goods might make the situation even worse. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that is the difference between panic buying and prepping. Prepping, you're getting your things slowly and steadily. All right? If you've taken a look at any of my pantry videos, I didn't go out and get a year's supply of food in one day. It took years for me to build that up. And now that I have it, I just maintain it by filling in the gaps. This stockpiling of goods starts with consumers, durables, and are purchased frequently, including goods such as household appliances, automobile, etc., and really anything that people see that would have value in their lives later on down the road or in the immediate. If this situation keeps on, there would be a scarcity of perishable goods such as food, milk, etc. Finally, there would be a scarcity of daily supplies, and the economy starts falling apart. Senior citizens would become most vulnerable to this as their savings in cash becomes worthless. Why is their savings in cash becoming worthless, ladies and gentlemen? Because the value of those dollars that they already earned is being stolen by the printing of more money. If you grasp one thing, I wish it would be that. Soon, banks and other financial lending institutions would go bankrupt and the loans lose the value. People stop depositing money, resulting in depletion of cash in the banks. When hyperinflation occurs in a country, the value of that particular country's currency would plummet and lose its value in the international forex markets. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I really hope you got something out of this. I know this was a bit of a longer video, but man, I tell you what, I think it's very important that people understand where it is that we are headed. We are headed to a hyperinflation scenario, whether it's the money losing its value through the government printing more money, i.e. that it's going to cost you $1,000 to buy a loaf of bread, or whether the government changes the system to a new dollar system where they change the definition of a dollar, where it's going to cost you a lot more labor, nonetheless, to buy that same loaf of bread than what it cost you today. It doesn't matter what they want to call it. The matter of fact is that you're going to end up paying a lot more of your labor later on for the same things that you can get today.